Alright, we're going to finish up 7.2, graphing rational functions. So this is the second and final video, and we're going to be graphing those translations of rational functions. Okay? So, this is what the transformations would look like. So our core concepts here. Okay? Well, we remember just a rational function had a number over x. Okay? Then our asymptotes were at the x and y axis. Now, I can move things to the right. Remember, grouped with x, and that h down there is grouped with x. So we would do the opposite. So if it's a plus h, we go left. If it's a minus h, we go right. And what that is just moving that asymptote from that y-axis left or right. All right? And then this plus k, like all of our plus k's, move the graph up and down. So it's going to take that asymptote that's at the x-axis and it's going to shift it up or down. Okay, and then other than that, we're going to graph these the same. So let's get started with number 2. Okay, so let's start by looking at what happens here. So I have a plus 2 grouped with x. Okay, so that's going to move us left 2. I have a minus 1 tacked onto the end, so that was our k, and that moves us down 1. And I have this negative out front. Remember, that is a reflection in the x-axis. Okay, so let's get our asymptotes drawn. Okay, so that tells us if I go left 2, so instead of having the y-axis be an asymptote, it went left 2. So here's my asymptote. That's why I like to draw them. It shows me where my graph moved. And then the asymptote that's the x-axis moved down 1, so it moved down here. Okay? All right. So these are the values x and y cannot equal. Other than that, it equals all real numbers. So if we look at the domain, remember that's the x value, it's all the numbers except when x is negative 2. Okay, so it's all real numbers except x cannot equal negative 2. Okay? Or you could just say except negative 2, because we're just talking about x's there. You can leave that part off. Now, instead of writing out all real numbers, I am going to abbreviate and use the symbol that looks like that. Okay, so every time you see that, it means all real numbers. All right, so our range are all the y values. Well, it's everything except for where that orange line crosses the y-axis. So it's all real numbers except when y is negative 1. Okay, so that is my domain and range. And now we just need to graph our equation. So we're going to get a table. I'm going to get my calculator to help me out. Otherwise, you can just plug in values for x. That's fine. But I have negative 4 divided by, and I need to put this x plus 2 in parentheses, or it doesn't leave that plus 2 in the denominator, okay? So put x plus 2 in parentheses when you divide by it, all right? And then we have a minus 1 on the end of the equation. So if I go to my table, let's get a few more numbers here. I have a negative 6, 0. I have a negative 4, 1. I have a negative 3, 3. Then you see where it has the error, so I'm just going to draw my line. That's the asymptote. Then has negative 1, negative 5, 0, negative 3, and I'll jump down to 2, negative 2. Okay, I'm just skipping those decimals. All right, and again, you can always, because we already have it entered in, I'm going to have that graph it. That is what my graph should look like. Let's just see if it works out. So at negative 6, 0, so right here, remember our 0, 0 did not move. Negative 4, 1. And negative 3, 3. All right, so it goes from here and then up. Does not cross that asymptote. Okay, negative 1, negative 5. 0, negative 3, and 2, negative 2. So if you are graphing these on a quiz, I expect to see exact points on your graph. I think you should go ahead and draw those asymptotes, so I want to see the asymptotes and the exact points. At least 3 per curve here. So it would be 6 total on the hyperbola. Alright? So my graphs do look the same. Alright, now that negative just meant, so instead of being here and here in the first and, well, if you pretend these are quadrants made up by our asymptotes, okay, we'd have the first quadrant and the third quadrant if it's positive. This equation's negative, so it's going to be in the second and fourth. Okay, so let's move on and do number 3. Okay, so let's look at what transformations are happening. Nothing is in front of this. Remember that number on top doesn't mean anything. It's not a stretch or shrink, okay? This down here has nothing grouped with x, so it's not moving left and right, but I do have a -2, and so that means my graph is moving down 2 from whatever the parent function is, which is 3 over x. So if I draw my asymptotes, it did not move left and right, so I still have one on the y-axis, and then I went down 2, so this one that is on the x-axis actually needs to move down 2. I'm getting my dashes bigger every time I draw it. Okay. Alright, so our domain is all these x values, okay, and it's every x value except where that asymptote touches that x-axis. So it's all real numbers except 0. And the range are all the y values except where it crosses that asymptote crosses that y-axis, and that's at -2, so it's all real numbers except -2. Okay, so there's your domain and range. Let's get our table. And again, it's just plugging numbers in. Well, okay, you could divide by a -3 and go from there, or plug it in your calculator. And I just find that faster because you have them, you're allowed to use them. But if you don't have this ability, just plug in numbers for x, and then you get your y. Okay. Alright, so let's go where I have some whole numbers here. Let's see, do I have any more if I go any farther? Nope, because that's approaching that asymptote. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down, and I'm just going to do these 3 closest to my asymptote. So I have a -3, -3, -2, -3.5, -1, -5. There's my asymptote, it has that error. And then I'm just going to do those next 3. So I have 1, 1, 2, -0.5, and 3, -1. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and graph that so I can check my graph once I plot these. So it'll do its thing while I plot. I go -3, -3 from my 0, 0, -2, -3.5, -1, -5. And then draw my branch. Okay, I have a point at 1, 1, 2 at -0.5, and at 3 I'm at -1. And draw that branch. Well, my pictures look the same. Alright, let's try it one more time. Okay, so let's list what's happening here. I have a -1 grouped with x, so this is moving things left and right, and we do the opposite of what it says. So instead of going where x is -1, we're going to go +1, so we're going to go right 1. Whoops, helps if I write the number 1, huh? And this +5 on the end means we're going to move that graph up 5. Okay, so my asymptotes here, I moved the y-axis right 1, not the y-axis, but the asymptote that's at the y-axis. And then the asymptote at the x-axis is going to move up 5. Okay, I'm not going to cross those lines. And so once I have those, that's why I go ahead and do domain and range. It's pretty easy. It's all real numbers, so I can actually put that on each of them. Except, they both have exceptions here because we have 2 asymptotes. Okay, so the x-axis is our domain, all of those numbers except where that orange meets, and that's at 1. Okay, the range are all the y values except where that asymptote meets up at 5. Okay, so there's my domain and range. All real numbers except 1 and all real numbers except 5. Okay, let's get our table. So x, y, get my calculator. Now again, I have, I'm dividing by a binomial, so I do need to put 1 divided by parentheses x minus 1 and then close the parentheses. Oops, I have to get a 1 in there. Okay, if you don't have x minus 1 in parentheses, it divides by x and then subtracts 1 the whole thing. So make sure it's in parentheses and then plus 5. All right, so let's see. Yeah, I'm going to just do -2, and it's like 4.7, -1, 4.504. So if you can get all whole numbers, do that, but in this case, it's not going to happen. So then I end up with, let's see, at 1, it's our asymptote, 2 is at 6, 3 is at 5.5, and 4 is at 5.3. While that graphs, I'm going to plot my points. At -2, I'm going up 4.7. At -1, I'm at 4.5. And let's see, at 0, I'm at 4. So this one's really, really tight branch right in there. It gets closer, okay? And then at 2, I'm at 6. At 3, I'm at 5.5. And at 4, I'm at 5.3. Remember, it just does not cross the orange asymptotes that I drew. And that is what that picture looks like. All right, so go give this a try in your practice and do the whole practice, 11 through 20. And then submit it on Big Ideas. Submit your screenshot into Canvas.